Hello, is the microphone on already? Can you hear me? I think we are about ready to start. I see thumbs up, so that's a good sign. So we are starting a little bit later, and hopefully it will be a very interesting session, so you all stay also 10 minutes later before joining lunch. So my name is Adjeuke. I'm working as an expert on climate change adaptation at Deltares in the Netherlands. I'm also a coordinator of a research and innovation project called REACHOUT. Can't hear me. Okay, so I'll speak out a little bit louder, so maybe point to microphones like this. It's improving now? Okay. So please welcome everyone to this next session on extreme events and tools for climate resilience. So this is a joint session in multiple ways. So it's a joint session of two conference themes. So it's dealing with extreme events and stepping up climate action, support through climate platforms and climate services. So these themes together and a lot of different initiatives currently working on implementation of the Green Deal and on the adaptation, the mission on adaptation, have jointly organized this session. And we have had great introductions this morning already on the huge challenges that we have within the EU, and especially also with this mission on adaptation. And in this session we will discuss how knowledge and tools and climate services can support these huge ambitions of the mission on adaptation. So to do this in an interactive way, we will have a few pitches to start a discussion, but then we really want to get you involved in discussing with us what are the challenges and how are we going to address them. And this challenge, just to give you a few characteristics of this challenge. So it's really how to provide information and knowledge that leads to actionable adaptation, and basically we're also not starting from scratch there. So also how to use all the existing knowledge and tools that's already out there and has been assembled over many years already. And also how to use this, and this is what was mentioned this morning also, these services in a way that they are locally legitimate. I think that's a huge challenge, and what's the role of co-creation also in this process. And we were talking about adaptation is spatially, but also we need to think in steps into time, so basically in pathways to climate resilience. So also how are we going to support specific these pathways to resilience and make the change from a risk mitigation approach to a climate resilient development approach, as was mentioned today. So a lot of questions that will come across in this session, and therefore we have a great panel that I will introduce later, but to allude a little bit more on the context of this session and the whole ecosystem of projects and platforms that is supporting the mission on adaptation, I want to give the floor to Guido for a brief introduction. Guido.
Many thanks, Ad. Good morning. You can hear me, right? Yeah, good. I'm supposed to give a brief introduction here. I mean, what we have listened before is that we are looking, I mean, in the opening, that we are looking for actionable knowledge to support the mission, to go forward. The mission wants to have adaptation faster, better, more systemic. We're struggling with it. I mean, we will see in some of the pitches where we struggle. So we want to see exactly what are the failures here, what is not working out. The important element for the mission is not only that it's actionable, it should be useful, it should be reliable, because at the end we're not talking about research projects where we just test, and if we fail, then we fail, and it's a pity because, I mean, we have to fail in research as well. But if we do something with real people in real regions, in real communities, that's different. They wouldn't, I mean, it's much more difficult to accept that things are not reliable. That there are remaining uncertainties, or that you cannot quantify them, or that you don't know how to deal with them. and what is the role of the stakeholders. So when we talk about the action knowledge, the discussion we are looking for here is which are the tools we should be using, we should be promoting under the mission. How can we use them? How can we communicate best to the communities we work with and to the regions? How can we integrate them best also into climate adapt? Climate adapt is the framework we do have. So we do have the adaptation support tool, we do have that framework. So how can we work within the different projects? And I'm very happy that this is an action, or this is an activity here, a session where we have so many projects working together. And I think that's also very important. It's one of the principles for ECCA, bringing people together who work on similar issues. And we shouldn't be working alone, standalone solutions, but really think in systems, how can we connect much better what we are doing? And the mission aims to do this also. So the questions which the mission, or at least the mission implementation platform, which I'm also representing here, is looking for is which tools should we look for, how can we use them, and how can we also bring them better together in the different work we're doing. And I think this is the introduction, and now I look forward to, where's Art again? Oh, here behind me. So let's go to the pitches, let's be specific and really get some ideas here.
Yes, so the pitches will be introduced also to another co-host of the session, Jan Koetz, in a minute. Before he's doing that, I just want to point you to a session that we have tomorrow, where we will demonstrate a few climate services and tools in the Hibernia building, in the Latouche room, tomorrow at 11:30. So today we will discuss on how to use different tools in general to support our challenges. Tomorrow we will really demonstrate some practical examples of tools. So Jan?
Thank you. So indeed, I'm Jan Koetz, the coordinator of TransformAr, one of the 6 that come together here for this session, and we all aim to work on the adaptation mission. So that is our main aim, basically, to improve regions and communities to get it operational. So when we will have like 3 pitches, then 3 short pitches. That is the idea. The first one is more like on how the regions can be supported in the communities. So that is Valeria that will be coming. Then the second pitch will be on the uptake of tools, because a lot of it exists, of course, and we develop a lot more even. But how does that get used, basically? How can regions and communities that basically are not used to all this sort of tools can be using it? And the pitch 3 gives like some examples of tools that are out. So let's move now. Until after each of these pitches, we have like a Slido. So then you have to get up your smartphones and help us voting on what you think. So we move now to the first one. See, I'm also promoted now as organizer of the tech things. Project coordinators need to be able to do everything. So Saioa. Oh, sorry, Valeria. Come on.
Yes, thank you. So for this first pitch, I would like to quickly introduce the Pathway to Resilience project and what we are starting to work on for regards options for comprehensive support for regions, and how this relates then to the tools that we're also discussing later on. So first of all, very briefly, the Pathways to Resilience project just started this January. It's going to be a 5-year-long project on the emission adaptation. And really, regions are really the core of this project. We have 4 main objectives. The first one is to mobilize regional interests and networks. We want to do this to really leverage political commitment towards the mission adaptation, and also really elevate the ambition and capability that the regions and the different stakeholders within the regions currently have. We also want to trigger a wide engagement of citizens, but also of a broad group of different stakeholders, and to do this through a co-creation process that can result in transformative climate resilience pathways. Then we also want to facilitate learning and capability development, and this should happen both within and across the regional cohorts that will network within the project, and then also increase knowledge on adaptation options across different key community systems. And finally, we of course want to boost enabling conditions, which includes funding and financing. so that in this way we can develop, test up, and scale the transformative, innovative solutions can then lead us to this increase in climate resilience. So what this means in practice is that there will be a total of 21 million euros that will be allocated to regions. And this will happen through cascade grants or sub-grants. And this will help the regions develop transformative pathways to climate resilience. And it will happen through 2 open calls. In total, this would then lead to 100+ regions, European regions and communities to be assisting in identifying locally led climate resilience solutions, and then the creation also of more than 10 innovation practice groups and finance innovation labs. And this will then help to increase the knowledge and the design solutions and business models for climate adaptation and resilience. So then when we look at the project as a whole, there are 3 main elements that are there really to provide support to regions. The first of these is the resilience journey, and you have to imagine that really as the process that the regions are taken through in different steps during the whole project. And this can ensure that they can reach their objectives successfully. The second element are adaptation pathways. You will also hear more about them in the next speech. But then we see in this project adaptation pathways really as the output that we expect regions to have at the end of the project, so really what they give us at the end, what they did for themselves actually at the end. And these pathways should be implementable, of course, to make sure that they actually can have concrete impact. And this will, because of that, we probably will expect that there will be innovation and really experimenting with different approaches, different methods by these regions. And the final element that is there to support regions will be these different tools. And then in our project, tools will really be what will support regions through each step, also the resilience journey, so that they can have these adaptation pathways, resilience pathways at the end. So in relation to these tools, what we are currently working on right now is a stock take of currently existing climate adaptation and resilience tools. What we're doing actually is looking at all the different steps that a region can do to develop resilience adaptation pathways. And then for each step, we're trying to identify which tools are out there so they can really tackle the different elements also of adaptation pathways development, not only, for example, risk assessment, but really all the different steps. So we did this, we started with a literature review, and then we found a lot of information about methods and frameworks that are available for resilience pathways development. But we quickly found out that in the literature there's not so much about tools specifically. So then for tools we'll turn into more the practice base and the people like you here in the room that have actually developed tools. And we're actually soon starting to interview different tools developers. We're starting with the people that are within our consortium, but we hope to expand also to other organizations and as many as possible really, so that we can find out which tools are out there for the different steps. And in doing this, our main objective really is to map out what is there right now in terms of tools and really find a way to present them to regions in a way that is comprehensive and that makes sense for them. So for later, when we will go through the different questions that you will answer, what we want to know from you from this is really what tools are available now and what should be really the next steps then in tool development. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. So then the Slido comes up. So get your phones online and here in the room, and either use the code or the QR. And then I'll be starting it. And then you have like an easy question. I hope that works. Like how your relationship is to tools, whether you're married with them or not, and so. So I'll give you a bit of time to activate. The first 10 have been responding. All right, so that seems to be working. So the second question, then you see it online appearing if you now continue to that. So do you think the current offer of tools for climate resilience is sufficient? And then you have like the choices. Yeah. Yeah, indeed, indeed. The choices, you see it on your phones, I guess, the choices that you're making. But not, yeah, all right. Waar zie ik dat nu weer? Dat ziet zo wat niet, hè? All right, we come back to that later. There seems like an issue when finding out what the codes mean now in this slide, but let us sort it out and continue with the next page. That will be of Saioa, right, on the different tools and the uptake. So you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I will dig a bit about how to enable the uptake of the tools and approaches for climate resilience, and then we will have also little interaction to get your feedback on this. The first idea that was also mentioned this morning is that despite we are making a lot of efforts in adaptation to climate change planning, we are still lagging behind on the implementation and, of course, on the monitoring of these action plans and adaptation. But despite that, we still face some uncertainty about the problem of climate change when will we face these extreme events that we have here this morning, and where exactly and how much we have some uncertainty about that. But we know that there are some enabling conditions that will make our adaptation much stronger, which is a strong policy, planning, and legal framework. We also hear this morning about the adequate financial resources and how difficult it is for adaptation to get these needed resources. We have also heard a lot about collaboration, engaging everyone at society, private, public citizens. Another important enabling condition is the capacity building and knowledge sharing or generation, and of course the behavioral change, which is also related to the extremes that we mentioned this morning. So the context of adaptation is that we are under an uncertainty on these impacts, the where, when, how much, and we have also quite complex systems at city level, but also at regional level, and we need some flexibility in these planning processes. So new approaches are needed. We have here the very old-fashioned way where you have predict and act. Well, I see that there is a problem and then I will act. Then there are more elaborated methods where you envision different futures, possibilities, and then you try to plan for these different options. And then we have the dynamic adaptive planning where you envision different futures, and you also envision different ways to reach this, minimizing this future risk in a dynamic way, and this is also linked to monitoring, so you navigate through the different options. And one of these possibilities, like dynamic adaptive policymaking, is the flexible adaptation pathways, which this figure from Deltares shows very nicely where it means and how it's represented. So this approach, maybe some of you were aware of these flexible adaptation pathways, but maybe some you were not aware. And another level of complexity is, even if you know about adaptation pathways, we were wondering, do you know that there are existing guidelines that can help you or can support the regions and cities in order to build their and develop their adaptation pathways? So there are different options available. We have a guideline from a recent project where it shows the different steps and it includes a few case studies. There is also available at the moment the Resilience Pathway Handbook, and very interesting, as it was mentioned before, it includes not, or it considers not only adaptation, it also considers the disaster risk management perspective as an integration of both of them. And you can also use a playbook for transformational adaptation. This tool is very good for the co-creation workshops, more interactive way of developing a pathway through the different stages, and at the end you develop an adaptation pathway. But we not only have guidelines, we also have different tools that can support the design and visualization adaptation pathways, which is also very important for awareness raising, is important for communicating this flexibility approach. And at the moment there are two tools. One, the pathway generator, where it highlights very nicely the tipping points or points of no return. And then we have the ARC resilience pathway visualization that helps you through the different stages. And this tool is a bit more focused on heritage, urban buildings, urban environment, and as well as agriculture sector. And it also includes some assessment of the effectiveness of the different pathways alternatives. So we have some tools in regards to adaptation pathways, but now going back to the barriers of the uptake of these tools, and this is just one example, but as Valeria mentioned before, there are tools for different stages of the adaptation planning, and there are a number of barriers. Here, what are highlighted is just those barriers that are mostly commonly seen in knowledge generation or knowledge sharing sphere, and these are no awareness of the tool, so maybe some of you were not aware that there are available tools for adaptation pathways or for other type of resources. Also lack of training on how to use the tools. There could be also a language barrier. In some countries, English is quite used language, but in others, it's a big barrier if the tool is just in English. It can also, another barrier can be related to the complexity of the tool. So if it's easy to use, probably more uptake is seen. This morning, we also hear about the silos of the different knowledge. So, of course, you could have a limit awareness of the topic or knowledge on a specific topic on adaptation, so then you probably would not use the tool. And there is also, as it was mentioned this morning, there may be a gap in the required information. So some tools may require information or data, and depending on the availability of this data, the use of the tool can be successful or not. And another possible barrier is the lack of pedagogy for decision makers, meaning that tools give you an output, and but sometimes decision makers, they don't know exactly what to do with this output because it's outside their context. So they may not recognize the value or purpose of using that tool. And as we have here before, we have also a lack of accessibility of the tools. And I will leave it here because the next part will be Slido, and we want to hear a bit more about your opinion on the barriers of the tools, focused mainly on knowledge part. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we move then to the question on the barriers. Oh, here, okay. See, so you see those that Saioa now just presented, and the question is to rank them, right? So from 1 to 8.
So as you are still trying to answer this question, I want to introduce also to you our panelists for this afternoon that will start a discussion on the outcomes of the Mentimeter and also discuss with you some of the main issues coming out of this. So I want to introduce at the right-hand side of me, at the far end, is Thomas Koetz from Climate-KIC. He's a senior advisor on resilience for the regions, and he has been working with the Mission on Adaptation Secretariat before, and before that working on biodiversity. Next to him is sitting Guido. He introduced himself already from the Resilience project. So Jan is not only a good technical moderator, but also coordinator of the TransformAr project. So if anyone knows a lot about transformational adaptation, it should be him with such a project title. Saioa from Tecnalia just gave the previous introduction. Next to Saioa is Nieves Peña from Tecnalia, very experienced researcher on decision support tools at Tecnalia. And Valeria already gave the first speech. So I'm just looking at the outcomes of this Mentimeter question, and also linking it back to the previous Mentimeter question, which was, do we have sufficient tools? And then there's nobody saying, no, we don't need, so we have sufficient, and nobody's saying, well, we have, yeah, we need a lot more tools. So there was a kind of a conservative answer. Everybody was in the middle. Yes, we have a lot of tools, but we need more of them. And then, of course, now this Mentimeter question is saying there is no awareness of tools as the main barrier of for adopting them. And I think that relates, of course, to awareness within the regions and the decision makers. So maybe, Thomas, could you reflect on the outcome of this Mentimeter briefly?
Yes, and then I think also pinging it back to the mission's approach and the mission's intention and our respective projects we are involved in particular also the Pathway to Resilience project. There's enormous amount of need to really work with the regions and to empower them to actually sort of address this need to move towards resilience by themselves. So there's a very strong component, for example, in the Pathway to Resilience project, where we want to work with these 100 regions that will get the sub-granting and additional support through the consortium. An enormous amount of our interaction with them is actually building capacity. For them to walk this pathway to resilience themselves. And so that's important, and that's their number 3. We also provide as input to this work a lot of sort of digestion and support in reaching or providing them different tools. So this is about the awareness of tools and bringing that to them, and trying to obviously also address the complexity of this. I also would like to mention though, which was related before, there is this component of someone mentioned failure, and that we can fail in science and innovation, but we have to really get to terms in the regions and in the context of climate resilience. In our understanding, though, it's also very important that we leave in efforts towards transformational change, we leave also room for failure and experimentations, even at a larger scale. That needs to be part and parcel of the design of how we address sort of this mission approach. And in that context, I also see the mission itself a great opportunity to test, experiment with tools, and eventually also have some tools failing because they eventually not work. So I think that is also a great opportunity that this mission tries to give us. So maybe I leave it at that.
So don't get too nervous about failing tools. I think that's that's a good message. Maybe one more element from this poll. So in second place, people rank that tools may be too complex to use. And I'm looking at you, Nieves, as you're one of the most experienced researchers on really supporting regions, municipalities with tools. How do you deal with that in your daily work?
I think I was also looking at that answer from the poll, and also this morning in the plenary session, I think that one of the speakers was saying that we, from the research, from the researchers, we are building very evidence-based and very nice tools with incredible plots, with incredible maps, but when you go to the local municipalities and you show sometimes this tool, they say they are great, but they are not usable for me. So we really need to work on how to make these tools more usable and more friendly for the end users, because at the end, what we really want is that municipalities are able to use them and to make a reality implementation of adaptation. So I think that this is very much related on this capacity building, because from my personal perspective, I think that when you see something that you don't really understand, you don't use it, and if you don't use it, you really don't learn about it. So I think that we have to start a little bit transforming and making more friendly climate services for the citizens and for the municipalities, so that they can be really use it, this information. So this is
Yeah, so it has to come from two sides, is what you're saying. So there needs to be more capacity building, but also we as developers
I think
need to make them more friendly.
Yeah,
and how does that look like, a more friendly climate service?
From the perspective of REACHOUT, I think that it has been really nice, because REACHOUT project, we are really working with these two sides, because we are working researchers that we have really nice tools, but we are also on the other side working with municipalities. And we have been working on 1 year on building of narratives. And I think that this morning also was mentioned this idea of the storytelling. And I think that emotions and what is if you tell people something that is related with their real life and with past experience, that they really notice that this is something that is happening, is something that is happening in the future more frequently. The impacts already have been really heavy, but in the future are going to be more intense. So I think that these narratives and these storytellings are an incredible, great tool, not only to show the outcomes of these tools, but also as a process to build this awareness. Because also I think that we think that there is only one direction from the tools to the municipalities, but the municipalities and the citizens and the local civil workers know a lot about their impacts. They know more than us about what is really happening in their city. So sometimes with these narratives, they also express what are really the impacts, what are the places of the cities where, and sometimes this dialogue allow us to also update the tools with additional knowledge, validate even models, etc. So I think that this process and this building of storytelling and narrative is really powerful to go for this awareness in the cities and the usable of the tools.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Nieves. I think we have one more question. Do I need to push enter or what should I do, Jan?
Yeah. See, I have a PhD in Slido. All right, so what would enable to use the presented tools? And that, well, that is the next one. Yeah, so we'll see what inputs are coming in, right? All right, see, I see people are typing, well, at least one person, to be exactly. You see, we've chosen for word cloud. Like that is also, of course, like the element that that people say it's not graphical enough. Like, right, and then you use what is available.
Yeah, so we move on with the next page. Please continue to fill out these things, and we will also use whole information of this session to come up with a publication, also a joint publication of all participating projects on the outcomes, and use this. So now let me introduce to you Hasse Goosen. He's director at Climate Adaptation Services in the Netherlands, and he has been in the middle of climate adaptation and climate service development in the Netherlands with his organization, also building the national knowledge platform for climate adaptation in the Netherlands. So, and he's also a co-lead of the REACHOUT project. So Hasse, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot, Ad. So I'll be introducing the third topic for discussion for this session. The question, does transformational adaptation require a transformation of climate services? So do we need additional tools to what we are already using? And I'll introduce this question by taking you also through some results of the REACHOUT project that Ad already mentioned. So within REACHOUT, we are targeting cities, and in particular we have selected 7 city hubs across Europe, and we are supporting them by building up a AAA toolkit, and AAA stands for Analysis, Ambition and Action. So we are taking the cities through these 3 types of activities, and the tools that we are using are connected to the EU landscape of data services, so Copernicus, GEOS, and so forth. So most cities have started with this first phase of diving into the analysis, so more sort of quantitative risk assessment types of approaches, and we are all quite familiar with that type of work. And we have a suite of tools available. I'm not going to talk about the details of these tools. There is a session tomorrow in exactly the same time slot as today in the Latouche room, where we will give demonstrations of what these tools can do. So we have, for example, a thermal assessment tool developed by Tecnalia, but also a social vulnerability tool that maps vulnerability at sort of the neighborhood scale of cities. This is developed by our colleagues from UCC in Cork. Then we also have a variety of flood-related tools, so pluvial flooding, riverine flooding, coastal flooding. Again, those will be on display in the demo session tomorrow, so please come and join us for that. So cities are working with these tools, but then we also want to address this ambition phase. And what do we mean by this ambition phase? This is something quite new also for the cities. What we mean by this, and you're probably all aware or familiar with the adaptation cycle or the adaptation support tool. And actually in this cycle, assessment of risk is followed directly by selection of options, whereas we propose to sort of build in a deliberate step in between, where you zoom out, where you diverge, and you think about what is the long-term future going to look like, but also zooming out in terms of scope, so looking into other policy domains. Also zooming out in terms of spatial resolution, so looking at the city within its landscape and its historical evolution. So taking a step back and developing a vision, a long-term urban vision, taking into account climate change. So that is what we mean by this ambition phase. And we believe that by doing this, this opens up the decision space for more transformative ideas. So really addressing the root cause of climate risk. And for that, you need to look at the wider area, the surrounding area of the city. We also think that this ambition phase helps you to address more fundamentally what is the city, how does it depend on the natural system, and can we transform the city, making better use of the natural system, and in that way challenging the cities to go beyond the traditional engineering solutions. And we believe that in the longer term, this will have a higher payoff in terms of resilience, sustainability, as well as social well-being. You could see this like a pyramid where we place the transformative adaptation at the bottom, at the fundament of the pyramid. And the better we succeed in addressing those issues, the more stable the system becomes. And I think you will see in many cities across Europe that it's exactly the opposite form of an unstable pyramid, where all the sort of natural ability to cope with climate extremes have diminished. Okay, so within REACHOUT, we are really trying to stimulate this transformative thinking. And we also believe that for that, we need a new and more positive narrative. And that relates to what Nieves just mentioned, this storytelling and really making the shift from risk to resilience and making this into a positive story of urban transformation. So moving from the climate hazards we fear to the city we want. Changing from a negative risk-aversive frame towards a new positive framing of opportunities and rethinking urban design. And this creates a demand for a different type of tool. So less data-driven, less quantitative perhaps, and more design-oriented. Now, so we're working with our cities in this process, and we see that already many of the cities are making this shift and making the combinations of the hazard types of tools with the social vulnerability mapping, but also using design tools to redesign the cities. We have a climate resilient cities toolbox, which is developed by Deltares, which allows you to sort of redesign the city and see what that does in terms of climate resilience. And a nice thing, all the cities are working on developing these climate stories, and they're all really enthusiastic about these these things. We also see that not many cities are making deliberate adaptation plans and strategies. They're rather working on mainstreaming the information into other policy domains and trying to piggyback with other urban transformations. So that is also a new way of working. Now this is a picture of the Climate Resilient Cities Toolbox. I don't have the time to explain more about this. Again, there's a session tomorrow on this. And this is a snapshot of the climate stories. They are being published online. This is the example of Milan. Really nice. Also this afternoon there is a session in the Podol room, I believe it is, the late afternoon session. So if you're interested in how to develop these stories and to see some examples, I invite you to join us there. So yeah, I wanted to leave you with this question. So does transformational adaptation require a transformation of climate services? And for that we need Jan again to, to help us. Thanks.
All right, so that is the question also posed. Does transformational adaptation require a transformation of the climate services? It's already like a question you can debate a lot about what, what we are asking, but there's only like 5 choices. In a way, the explanation of this one is like as expected. If you want to be something transformational, then the tools, of course, cannot be the same. So that's basically also what most of you are saying. Some say, I guess, they stay the same. So that's also like, in a way, for many regions that are not yet aware of the tools that exist or so, just using the existing tools is already like a progress and a way forward. So yeah, so you can be transformational with using existing tools, but of course you also need like an innovation process in your region, right? So then the last question, because this was also the last page, what is then needed basically, to achieve transformational adaptation? And then you have like number 8, 8 options with the question to rank again. And then after that, Atwell moderating again, right?
Right. So this was the last question of the Mentimeter, and I think it was a very interesting presentation of Hasse, and also the previous question asking the general question, do we need a transformation also in tools? I think the majority of the respondents were positive about it, so saying yes, we need transformation of tools, at least to some extent. And then to specify this a little bit further, it's what we see popping up as a first important element is that we need a better understanding of social vulnerability and equity issues. So basically, how can we couple adaptation with social issues? And I think this was also stressed this morning in some of the introductions. So who of the panel would like to give a response to that? Guido?
I'm happy. I mean, I'm very pleased with the result, to be honest. I think the social vulnerability or equity are often, I wouldn't say forgotten, but at least neglected. Very often, I mean, in the processes where I've been part, for example, on decisions on water allocation, who gets the water, the most powerful actors, they push forward and they get the rights, they get the acquisition of the natural resources in this case, and the social elements, they are left behind. And I mean, they're always there, they're always in the public announcements, but then when you get really to the hard decisions, they are not there. So I'm very pleased with this decision. I mean, in the Resilience project, we work now with 7 regions, and we made a selection of regions where we really looked for which are the ones which have most vulnerability, which have least capacity to work on the topic. So I mean, it's usually a region where we have half a person working on adaptation, and not one person full-time working on adaptation. And these are really the regions which I believe, or which we believe, that they need specific support to go forward, because otherwise, I mean, they will be left behind. And that's also one of the overall approaches of the Green Deal, which we shall respect and shall be looking for. So I mean, that's my analysis of this Slido, and many thanks for the good responses there.
Thank you, Guido. And if we look a little bit further, so what would it mean? So better understanding social vulnerability. So what? So you're saying regions that are least capacitated, or regions that are, you could use it for prioritizing your adaptation and joint social programs, right? What else could it mean? So Jan, I saw you raising your finger. You want to comment on this?
What else could it be? So the tools are not that easily available for social vulnerability, right? So we did like in an earlier project, and we continue on that in TransformAr. So we asked then like mayors, and so like what do you find important, like for a nature-based solution or so? And they say, oh, recreation. We want to have like people to have like some quietness. So we want to have like to make it more beautiful. And then you come up with tools. Okay, we can calculate carbon sequestration. We can calculate like a water infiltration. And then they look at you like, we don't really need that. What is carbon sequestration, by the way? so having like better approaches for social vulnerability is basically like more participation and bringing people together. And that is, of course, it also relates to like economics and seeing also like, what can people do to improve, well, their vulnerability? But it's basically a lot is by coming together and bringing people together. I guess it's more simpler tools basically rather than numeric.
Okay, Thomas, you want to react? And after that, I want to also see if there's any comments and questions in the audience, because we really also want to. So maybe we can also get a little bit more light, because it's really difficult for me to see who's raising hands, for instance. And then we have a microphone for you to use. So Thomas, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Jan also said. I mean, and looking at sort of what kind of tools would we need for transformational adaptation. And I think it's important to look at sort of what are key features of transformative innovation, and what are key features that we need to have. And for example, one element of it is you need to have a shared vision of where to go. And that's partly what also Hasse meant with his opening up and then closing. So I think we need tools for enabling the getting or bringing about a shared vision, which is a participatory tool in that sense, in a workshop or etc. I think another element is really important for transformative innovation is you need a systems and a portfolio approach. So there needs to be tools that really support the regions to think portfolio, to live portfolio, to manage portfolio, to monitor this. So it's a different level, yeah? So really multiple ideas of bringing this together. Same for participatory engagement, there are different approaches and tools, so you can break that up other than just saying, you know, we need participation. No, but which type for what? For the vulnerability assessment and equity, I think there are tools already existing for stakeholder, more systems mapping of people, of cascading sort of links and relationships to who is affected, etc., etc. But I think in thinking about transformative tools or tools that support transformative innovation, we need to really unpack first what are key features of transformations, and then really address them, okay, and how can we bring that about in the daily life of regions and with the expertise?
Yeah, maybe first see if there are any thoughts in the audience or questions. Please raise your hand and then we'll hand you the microphone. Yes, lady on the left here.
Hello, my name is Nora van Kouwenberg, representing IHE Delft and Beta Green, who's also developing tools. What we hear from cities is the need for interoperability, that is something that they really are asking for, because you come with a tool, they already have other tools, they have other systems. So what is your experience with that?
And Nieves, you can take that.
Sorry,
so the question is that cities want tools that are interoperable. So to say, so basically that, in my translation, that can be used within their common practice of information and knowledge management within the municipality.
Yeah.
And maybe we tend to think more in interoperability with, for instance, European climate service platforms, but that's of course for a local decision maker of less relevance.
Yeah, indeed, is one of the. I think that is one of the, let's say, barriers that cities are encountering, because what we are also seeing is that there are a lot of tools that need a contextualization on the city, and sometimes this data that is already there is not so easy for the municipalities to be able to integrate that data on the tools, so they need a lot of support to really make this interoperability of the different tools that are available. So I think that this is something, I think that there was another, in the pool, there was another question or answer about this lack of knowledge of the data that is needed to really make, to really operationalize these tools. So yes, in that sense, I think that the effort from the new Destination Earth, that I think that the vision from the European side of build a digital twin of not only climate data, but also social and economic data that can be really accessible, interoperate for different cities and regions, I think that is fundamental. And in that sense, I think that at this stage, what I can observe is that regarding climate, there is a lot of interoperable data regarding the past, regarding the future. But with regard to the social, economic data, is still a lack of this interoperability data. So I think that for me, we have to move a little bit on this, in this type of data to really merge and integrate everything for the future resilience.
Thanks a lot, Nieves. There's another hand.
It was a hand, I promise.
Sorry.
Just a question that I have to all of you. For me, there's, and I was kind of muttering under my breath about the responses to that question because there's a lot of stuff that's missing. There's a gap between talking about tools as ways of enhancing diagnostic understanding and enhancing a sense of kind of diagnostic projection in if, you know, option trees, if we model, if we do this, what about? Then there's the whole piece that we were hearing about earlier on action and what action requires, and that powerful statement about how much more effective it is to do things in community. I think one of the things we've learned a lot about innovation adaptation ecosystems and clusters is that you repeat some of what Europe managed to do very well on industrial development in clustering and ecosystems and create something similar. So what tools are there for the social experience of acting on change, of trialing alternative physical actions, alternative ways of thinking about water courses, alternative ways of using resources or waste, or coming together around financial models? Those suite of how do you enable community engagement and community kind of co-creation and action?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for asking this question, because that was a technical issue we had with the first pitch of the first Mentimeter question. We were asking basically these 4 steps that you were describing, and for each step, do we have sufficient tools? Not in general, do we have sufficient tools? And I think indeed for this diagnostic step, we have quite a lot of tools. And for also giving more insights in pros and cons and let's say co-benefits of actions, that it's becoming much more important if you want to become more transformative. We have some tools, I would say, but I think it's maybe good also to ask Valeria, because she has the task within this Pathway to Resilience project to build a toolbox for these 100 regions to support, well, all these steps, right, that you're mentioning. And Valeria, have you come across some of these tools already? And
yeah, so for now, can you hear me? Yes, I've mostly looked at the literature up until now, so on the tools I will have to get back to you in a couple of months. But in the literature, you see that there's, for example, much less attention on monitoring, signaling, implementation, diagnostic. Yeah, so there is, yeah, it is easier, so I think, also to develop tools from when you start with the risk assessment. There is quite a lot at this point. It can always be improved, of course, but when we go to the last steps, then there tends to be less, because, of course, you spend a lot of time in like developing also these pathways, but then you also have to make sure that they get implemented, and there I see there are less things right now.
Yeah.
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 Because I think that is really interesting, this because is what Hase was also explaining. This part of the ambition of trade vision is something that is really complex and require all the enables barriers that we were saying before to be in place. And once that is in place, we are able to build an ecosystem that is able to create those visions. So I think that somehow there are less efforts on that, because and when we think on tools, sometimes maybe because of my background, we think on software tools. But in this case, I think that we need soft tools that really support us on this. And regarding this issue, I think that there is also a second point there which says facilitate learning between cities. And I think that vision creation is really interesting in this building of communities of cities that can share visions of what we want to build. For example, this morning when the speaker was speaking about transformation of Dublin or transformation of Bilbao, for example, where I come from, it has been a really great transformation. Share this transformation with other cities. You also create that those enable conditions to happen, and think on futures that are also possible for us.
Yeah, in a way it's a peer-to-peer capacity building, which is a bit more horizontal, which is also very needed. I agree.
Thanks a lot for alluding this difference between soft tools and let's say the more software-based tools. And I think we still looking for a right balance, right? So it can't be only soft tools without the evidence base that we also should need to provide. So it's and also, by the way, in the P2R project, and Thomas knows a lot more about this. We don't only work on the tools component, but we also work on capacity building, enabling conditions, financing. So it's got all the elements. But we are in a tool session today, so that's. I think there's another question or remark from the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the insights and talks. A question I'm sort of wondering about, you know, we talked about there the interoperability, say, between different tools that are out there, and there are lots of tools being designed all the time, and the stakeholders that we're designing the tools for quite often necessarily don't exactly know how to use those immediately. So there's a bit of a gap, say, between the research, whether that's academic or elsewhere, and the users of the data. I guess my question is, do we need to create a tool that can be applied in any city, anywhere, say, in Europe, or is it better just to work very closely in partnership, say, as an academic with a particular city, and if we can just showcase in 50 cities or 10 cities around Europe, this really works here. We don't have to make a tool that's so simple that everybody in all the other cities necessarily uses it. They just have to see that, for example, in Cork or wherever it might be, this worked really well, we'll do that. And I guess the analogy I'm thinking about is, I bet you when, you know, refuse collection and recycling was being implemented across Europe, they didn't have a load of academics making a tool that allowed everybody in every individual city to think, aye, we should collect rubbish as well, that's great. They just saw that somewhere else did it, and it made the city cleaner and everyone liked it, so they just did it as well. You know, they don't actually have to have this bespoke cost-benefit analysis or whatever it would be of, you know, the benefits of collecting rubbish. You know, can we do something similar like that to stimulate the action we need for this transformational adaptation?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Very good question, I think, and basically you answer it yourself already, I think, and also the poll is answering the question, because the learning between cities is seen as key. So Guido, you want to respond to this?
I might add, I mean, I've been working for 20, 30 years in water management. And I mean, at the end, every water management body has its own tools. So what in the Resilience project, for example, what we are trying, I mean, with the financing tool or with the maladaptation tool, is to find some spots where we haven't found other tools which are available, which try to be as simple as possible, and then can be adapted to the local circumstance. Because, I mean, it's really very difficult to generate something which everybody will use, because everybody will have a way to adapting it. And I think it's, I mean, and on the other side, all the regions, all the communities we are supposed to work with, or we will work with, they are coming from different starting points. So they have done something, and they obviously they are looking for a next tool which will help them to go forward. And they would not be looking for a tool which obliges them to go back to have the same starting point as the other regions or the other communities. So they will look at those tools or those processes which help them in their individual way to go forward with the certain local circumstances that they have. I don't know whether that's a clear answer, but I mean, that's at least the way I approach it.
Thank you, Guido.
To complement, I think we are discussing a lot around many tools, many needs. At the end, I mean, we have to realize that there is no one tool that can solve everything, and I think that's why we mentioned before complexity. Complexity comes from the context point of view, the different views of the different communities, which it's part of our society. We will not all think the same way, and we will not have the same context. And I think as a result of this complexity, we are building many different tools to adequate the message, the vision, the needs to the specific context and needs of each region, sector.
I think it is also like a back and forth thing of what is needed, what is useful. We see that now in TransformAr, like in Finland, we have like a case on stormwater management, and then so they want to install like nature-based solutions. So then you ask, like, do you have already like a hydraulic model basically on your stormwater, on your sewers and numerical simulation? They said yes, we have that. But we're not using because, well, we can't work with it, and the consultants that done it are not updating it. So I guess like 2 years ago they had the question, we need a numeric model for our sewers, but now that they have it and they don't seem to be using it, and I see that in many other cities, they don't have that question anymore. So it's also dynamic, like what is useful at some point.
Yeah. There's a question over there. Efren first, and then we move to you. Yeah.
Efren Feliu from Tecnalia. I'll start by the 3 keywords and try to pitch it quick. 1, confusion. 2nd, alignment, and 3rd, competition. Sometimes the end users are confused. Which tools and why? So beyond the capacity building, there's a constellation of tools, sometimes overlapping, and the end users are not really sure why choosing one or another. Therefore, in the framework of the mission, in the framework of the required ambition to overcome climate challenges, I think that researchers or applied research should aim alignment or at least comprehensive mapping of what we are doing. Because a lot of times we are competing with similar offerings, and that's why the end users are confused. I think that in the framework of the mission, in the framework of this renewed ambition towards climate resilience, we should try to cooperate, organizing a little bit the knowledge and offering a clearer picture and map of what is available and why sometimes you have different alternatives, which could be related to different contexts and different local or regional conditions. But at least I know that competing is a driver of innovation, but cooperating for organizing knowledge and explaining well why different alternatives could be useful for different contexts perhaps is necessary now.
Yeah, and of course that's what we are constantly trying. Another question here.
Hi, morning everyone. My name is Denise Julian from Climate-KIC. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this conversation and I'm wondering, it feels like the not made here syndrome. Why we duplicate an effort? If we have tools, we can contextualize them into a region or adapt them, but we shouldn't be spending scarce resources reinventing the wheel over and over, is my view. I don't know what you were talking about, oh, we have to do it different, it's here, it's different, there, it's different, and that just feels like a huge, huge waste of time and resources if we are in a loop of just reinventing what's already been done. I get we take, we adapt, we contextualize, but we shouldn't be reinventing. Otherwise, why are we all sitting here in a forum like this discussing how to accelerate and amplify our impact?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question, I think.
Yes.
And that's also a question that I always ask myself. So,
yes,
and of course, none of us has a complete overview of what's out there already. But of course, we're all trying to build upon what there is already. And one of the questions was, of course, is that sufficient also if we want to move towards more transformational adaptation? Yeah, maybe one of Saioa, you want to comment on this?
I agree. One thing that I think I lack from the projects, I mean, I will contextualize to the European Union projects and to the mission or Horizon projects. Quite often, I think there is just one thing missing at the end of the project is we finish and we don't have a period for capacity building and knowledge transferation to broader community. So of course, smaller maybe regions or city involved in the project know about the tools, but we don't extend the knowledge and share it across. So that it may also hinder of the use and uptake of tools, and thus maybe another project is thinking, oh, I should create this, which may be similar with some complementarities, but at the end, I agree. Thank you.
So I would say we go to the last question and then we're going to wrap up. And we have Philippe Tulkens here from the Mission on Adaptation and the Commission to reflect on what has been discussed. So maybe last question, and then Philippe, maybe you can already prepare to step up. And then we can still finalize within a decent time so you can all have lunch afterwards. So last question. The honor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this talk. My name is Karin Nilsson. I come from the Swedish Forest Agency, and it's been extremely interesting to see how you talk about these tools, and also tools for cities, and then how you put them in a larger context. That's something we work with a lot within the Forest Agency as well. But I was interested in this. I mean, what tools are there available and useful for when you want something on one specific place, but you need to scale it up also to look on the landscape level, and how do we make such tools less complex and useful for users who maybe only want the local one? What tree should I plant somewhere, or what adaptation measure should I put exactly here? But they need to consider the water management, the rest of the environment. So, yeah.
Nieves, you want to respond?
Well, I think that indeed is what Valeria has been also explaining. I think that both in Peers to Resilience and also in REACHOUT, we are trying not to reinvent the wheel, but just do that mapping and try to, let's say, classify and provide in a simple way which are the tools that are ready to be used, simple tools for cities, which are the ones that maybe have a higher level of complexity and they require some contextualization. And we indeed last week we just published the AAA Toolkit website on REACHOUT, so you can access there. And I think that this is very nice because this classification of tools where you can, the cities can search through those and try to start using them in an easy way. But I think that this will be complemented in this Peers project, Pathways to Resilience, project, and I think that exactly what you are saying is what we want to develop, because it has to be simple, and tools have to be available in a simple way and classify also in a friendly way. So thank you for your comment.
Yeah, thanks a lot to you, the audience, and also thanks a lot to the panel. So before we leave, I want to give the last words to Philippe. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I decided to go for a risky exercise, not to go for a pre-prepared speech, but really listen to what was said and give you a few reactions on the spot. So please excuse me if it's not fully structured. I'll take a step back, and first, I'm very satisfied by the fact that it is assumed here that everybody knows what the mission is, the mission on adaptation to climate change. This is great, because in many places I go to, people don't even know that there is an EU adaptation strategy, that within this strategy there are several commitments taken by the member states on adaptation to climate change. And one of the ways to implement the strategy is through these EU missions on adaptation to climate change. So it's great if you know it. It's not the only way to progress on climate resilience, but it's an experiment that the EU tries to promote, push, fund also, and I would like to thank you for cooperating in this experiment. We heard about the multiple projects that are doing wonderful work with a lot of goodwill also to cooperate. But this should not be taken for granted. In the governance of the mission, there is no strong body that can steer and that has a permanent structure to implement it. It relies very much on the cooperation between projects, and we heard in the discussion that this will be crucial. So I cross fingers, let's continue to cooperate in a constructive spirit and not seek individual visibility in this activity, otherwise we won't be able to deliver. Also, the EU dimension was really well represented. Of course, we pay, so people acknowledge that, yes. But the transformation for climate resilience needs to occur at the national level, regional level. And the national dimension is absolutely critical. Most of the funding, even to research and innovation, still comes from the member states. Therefore, it's very important that you all, in your activities, relate to the competent authorities in your member states, at regional level as well, to just ask what are they doing for adaptation? How are they planning to bring change on the ground? What tools they wish to use? And it's through the interaction with these authorities at local level that things will change, in my view, and not just thanks to good speeches or even instructions from Brussels. This, in general, is not that effective. So the national dimension, the multi-level governance, is absolutely key to delivering together. One specific reaction on the tools, which is the topic of this session, is if you expect some people in the administration to use the tools, won't work. You said it. You know this. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the staff. So the response to that is what is called in the mission the technical assistance that is being provided through the mission implementation platform, but also should occur through the multiple projects. And it should be done in a coordinated way, so that some regions are not left without any assistance, and others are served by multiple projects or platforms. So this is a key message for the mission implementation platform. I'm sure you're aware of this. Let's organize this in a consistent way. And we need people, we need tools, but we need people. People who go and sit for sometimes weeks in the local areas, speak their language, and not tell them how to use the tool. No, probably use the tools themselves to prepare that region or local entity in the design of their resilience plan. This is fundamental. Because in public administration, they certainly don't have the capacity to do that everywhere. But in other sectors, they do. The private sector, the insurance companies, they know what is the reality. And if we have an asymmetric information between different actors of our society, this will create more problems. So we need, through the mission, to support the public administration in preparing the transition. Another reaction is also on the role of social science. So probably many of you are scientists, engineers, or they like technical stuff. But to bring change, I think we heard it also from Kirsten this morning and other occasions with her speech, without a strong involvement of social scientists who can address social aspects of the transition. We talked about vulnerability, distribution of the effects. We want progress. This is essential from the design phase of any tool. The solution is not technical, it has to do. And also we need to account for the fact that people are using tools all the time for other purpose. Yeah. In the mission, we try to attract the private sector. I don't have a network in this group, but I was struck by the fact that 3 companies responded to the Commission: Google, Microsoft, and IBM. That's a bit of a pity. Where are the others providing tools that can be used by the local administration, by the people, to plan and progress in their climate resilience? So here, I don't know if you are aware of companies, European companies preferably, that act in this sector and wish to explore whether the mission can be a good vehicle for their activities, even to do business. There's nothing bad with business. Please let us know. We'll be very happy to involve more private entities in the process. What we miss was one of the questions also in the polls is we need the socioeconomic framework that is conducive to change. Scientists can propose solutions, technical solutions, or solutions that are perfectly designed. If economically it doesn't work, it won't fly. It's simple, but it's still very true. So pricing policies at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level is key to bring change, and there are some very well-known simple economic instruments to trigger this. And then, just before concluding, one question on social vulnerability. Well, you said that there is a tool, but it's a very complex issue, and I was just wondering, but maybe you can give me the answer later on, whether researchers have access to the relevant data sets on wealth, all sources of wealth included, and on economic vulnerability. We saw through the energy price crisis very different reactions in the member states. In the member states where the wealth of the people was better known, they tend to focus the economic assistance to those who need it. Others gave just a waiver or an amount of money to everyone, which is economically inefficient. So I was wondering whether researchers could help in this, in progressing the access to data, anonymized data, of course, and find how to progress in the sometimes conflict between privacy and economic efficiency to aid and to support those who are really in need. So, please, my plea here to conclude is let's use all of the available tools and people in the mission for the regions that are participating to the mission, and we have 308 regions and local entities, and I'm sure they will welcome your support. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Philippe. So this was wonderful. We'll get back to this question on the social vulnerability data and privacy in the break, I guess. So I would like to thank you all for joining this session. So let's give also applause for the wonderful panel that we had and all the speakers. And please reach out to us during the remainder of the conference, and yeah, hope to see you also tomorrow at the tool session and later this afternoon in the session on the climate stories. So enjoy the lunch. Bye-bye.
Reach out to transform.